Bien, bonsoir. Je commence en français. En réalité, je vais continuer en anglais. No, I'm going to go on in English because it will be easier and simpler for the translators. So it's not really a conference you are going to see. First, you will see a 12 minutes film about the big Babylonian set of intolerance by Griffiths, which is very much a produce of COVID-19 because for 3 months I couldn't move from my home, and with the co-director we just did the film by emails. So anyway, at the end of it we had that, and it was prepared specially for Bologna, but I couldn't come. So now I am here with the film, and the conference will be mainly a commentary of the problems which I encountered and the problems which I discovered while preparing that short film. So now with the film 12 minutes.
Le studio de Griffiths est établi au nord de Los Angeles, juste au-dessous de l'intersection de Sunset Boulevard et Hollywood Boulevard. Faute de place, Griffiths édifie les décors de Babylone en face, sur un terrain inoccupé qu'il loue de l'autre côté de Sunset. C'est une vaste parcelle rectangulaire de près de 5 hectares, bordée à l'ouest par Hillhurst Avenue, au sud par Sunset Drive, à l'est par Talmadge Street et au nord par Clayton Avenue. Le premier décor construit sur ce terrain pour représenter Babylone est celui des murailles de la ville, où se déroulent les plus impressionnantes scènes de bataille. Édifiées au nord du terrain, parallèlement à Clayton Avenue, les architectures de bois culminent à plus de 20 mètres et permettent à cette hauteur le passage du chariot royal tiré par 2 chevaux. Un large espace, ménagé pour permettre les circulations de part et d'autre du décor, sépare 2 sections distinctes des remparts. Sa disposition est telle qu'à la prise de vue, le mur apparaîtra comme une continuité ininterrompue. De l'autre côté du mur, sur la face tournée vers Clayton Avenue, une rampe raide permet à l'attelage royal et aux figurants de monter jusqu'au sommet des remparts. À l'extrémité la plus à l'est de la muraille s'ouvre une porte monumentale qui traverse toute la construction. Une fois le tournage des scènes de bataille achevé, les décorateurs reprennent possession du terrain pour construire, en arrière des murailles toujours intactes, le grand parvis où semble se concentrer l'activité de Babylone. Le décor est gigantesque. 54 mètres de largeur, près de 41 mètres de hauteur, environ 120 mètres de profondeur. Ces dimensions sont si énormes qu'on ne peut le photographier dans son entier qu'à partir d'une tour de 28 mètres, installée 50 mètres plus loin et légèrement désaxée vers le sud. Le flanc droit du décor est du coup beaucoup plus visible pour la caméra que son côté gauche, créant un effet de fuite perspective que confirment les murailles encore visibles à travers la double ouverture de la grande arche au fond. Comme sur une scène de théâtre, le décor du grand parvis s'organise dans la profondeur en éléments verticaux successifs, dont chacun dissimule le vide ouvert derrière lui. Si ce décor était clos comme il paraît l'être à l'écran, ce serait une sorte de cuvette impossible à éclairer de façon égale, une enceinte interdisant les entrées et sorties des centaines de figurants. Il est en réalité largement ouvert à l'extérieur, particulièrement sur son côté gauche, éclairé par le soleil en fin de matinée. Tel que le voit un spectateur sur l'écran, ce décor n'est rien d'autre qu'une illusion optique savamment construite, qui invite à reconnaître un espace homogène là où ne se trouvent en réalité que des fragments disjoints. Sur de rares photos, la position de la caméra hors de l'axe prévu fait apparaître dans le décor des failles révélatrices. Dans cette image, par exemple, où la caméra est décentrée vers la droite. Ou dans cette autre, où c'est l'inverse qui se produit. La preuve est plus flagrante encore avec cette photo prise à la perpendiculaire du décor. Un décor toujours en construction, puisqu'une route de campagne passe encore au pied des éléphants, là où se trouveront plus tard les marches du grand escalier. On a longtemps cru que cette image et des dizaines d'autres montraient des ruines, les restes d'un décor ravagé par le temps. Il n'en est rien, et ce qu'elles exposent est bien la réalité des décors d'intolérance, tels que pouvaient l'avoir les voisins du studio. Des architectures disjointes, incompréhensibles pour le regard du passant, et qui ne pouvaient trouver leur justification qu'une fois filmées par l'objectif d'une caméra spécialement placée là pour leur donner un sens.
So don't be fooled by the credits. I should have thought of that. So don't be fooled by the credits. There was absolutely no production, no money involved, and the guy who wrote the original music is the 16-year-old son of my co-director. So it was just a labor of love. So that's it. Now, what we must understand is that from the release of Intolérance in 1916 till the end of the 60s, there was absolutely no new information available about the film. Griffith's papers were kept in New York, but there was not anything of it else there. And it means that for 50 years, we were depending, or they were depending, upon the publicity material which accompanied the film when it was released. And all of a sudden, in the late 60s, you had that book by Kevin Brownlow, fantastic book, which is The Paradise Gone By, which had a fascinating interview with Joseph Ennaberry, and Ennaberry was the assistant director to Griffiths. And Ennaberry told to Brownlow many things of greatest interest. This was in 68. 1970, you have the memoirs of Lillian Gish. And the memoirs of Lillian Gish, I'm sorry to say, that there is plenty about Intolérance, but you mustn't rely on it to check the facts. Then, slightly later, 73, you have two books, and strangely, two books with the same publisher. They are the memoirs of Billy Bitzer, who was the chief cameraman of Intolérance, and the memoirs of Carl Brown, who was Billy Bitzer's assistant. And especially the memoirs of Carl Brown, which is Adventures with David Wark Griffiths, they are absolutely essential. They are full of details, full of anecdotes, and Bitzer is the first to mention a name which never appeared before, which is the name of Walter J. Hall. And he says that he was the art director, but nobody heard of him. He was never mentioned in the publicity, and it was always assumed that in some way the sets of Intolérance were born out of Griffith's imagination, and that's it. And in fact, so he came with that name, Walter J. Hall, but absolutely unable to say more about him. Now we know much more about him, but at the time, completely unknown. So this was, you see, in 5 years, you have 4 or 5 books of memoirs, of souvenirs of the filming of Intolérance. And then another 50 years. There was 50 years between Intolérance and that surge of books, another 50 years, and you have new informations, not much, in fact, But you have photographs which appear. And this is because from the 70s, 80s, a lot of photographs of old Hollywood went on the market because people just disappeared and their sons or daughters didn't know what to want with them. So in fact, we got a number of new documents, and this is what I started with. We didn't have more than that. There was a lot of many people who worked on intolerance, but they were always working on the narrative structure of intolerance. They were never working on the actual set, how what is done, what was the reality of it. And especially, nobody realized that, in fact, you know that intolerance was made in at least two periods. First, it was done as medium-length film, and then Griffiths, after the success of Ku Klux Klan, Birth of a Nation, thank you, Griffiths decided to develop what he had done on the mother and the law. That it was called the mother and the law at the time. And what is very interesting and what appears clearly is that every new development of the film which existed before goes in the same direction, which is larger, wider, more populated. This is absolutely clear in the Mother and the Law, which was the basic story to start with, because we know that what he added to the Mother and the Law in the later periods of shooting went always in the direction of enlarging the figure. So it was not only Babylon, it was also the Mother and the Law. It was also the story of La Saint-Barthélemy, the massacre of the Protestants, where you have those fantastic, enormous sets of the Great Hall of the King, for instance, which are absurdly huge and spectacular. Anyway, the first thing I wanted to check was the dimensions of that set. Because from the start, we knew, we had figures given, especially, I'll forget Lillian Gish, but they were mainly given by Bitzer and Karl Braun. And in fact, calculating the dimensions was not difficult. In fact, this is exactly what they did to start with. You see, this is photoplay, and when in 1916 they published that big essay, publicitary essay on intolerance, to give the scale to the set, they photographed it with somebody in it. And then if you assume that, let's say I assumed that the extras were 1.70 meters. And from then, it's not very difficult to calculate the height. And if you know the height of the decor, then it's not difficult to calculate the width. But then, and this is where I was stuck, and this is where my co-director arrived, I had no means to calculate the depth. And he told me the only way to do it was to build a 3D model and to take a maximum of photographs just to check one against the other until we were reasonably certain that everything matched. And this is exactly what we did, meaning that at the end we had this. Or, it's exactly then that he told me, but if we are able to do this, we can navigate in the set. We can enter it, go around, understand things, and in effect, it allowed us to understand how the set worked, and it gave us the dimension that were missing, which were in fact there are one dimension which is indicated here, which is the distance between the back wall and the tower, the camera tower, and you see that it's almost 300 meters, which obviously raises the question of exactly where was looking at the map. Looking at the map, I'm going to show it to you. That's this one. You see the field, the 5 hectares we are speaking about is there. And you understand that to film it, the set has to be disposed slightly askew, and the camera had to be slightly askew too, because there was not enough backing space to put the camera tower. Which is exactly why in this photograph that you have seen now several times, which is this one. The tower, you see, is not exactly in the axis of the double arc. It is slightly diverted towards the south. And it was a pure technique necessity. Otherwise, there was not space enough. This is what in Billy Bitzer's, in Carl Brown's memory, the camera tower must have looked like. And this is quite obviously impossible. But the same as, for some time, for a long time, it has been assumed that Griffiths did really try to film the set from a balloon. And we have even photographs of Griffiths trying to do that. And here is the main culprit. You see, this is in photoplay again. The photography is obviously doctored, so much so that in fact they have added an elephant that doesn't belong to the set, but just to add to the symmetry. And that photograph of Griffiths, and you just look at it and you know that it is impossible that he has a cameraman with him and probably a small crew. No, it wouldn't work. But in fact, here is the photograph again. And there you see, it's in Cakalbron's book. And there you can see that Griffiths was safely giving orders on the side. I mean, they really had that balloon for a time, but it was a publicity stunt. But it was never used. And once you have understood how the decor, how the set was built, you know that it is impossible to film it from above, because then you would reveal the trick. So there was no way that would. In fact, there are a number of other problems, but my most useful, I did not have more than 20 or 30 photographs to work with. I was in lockdown, so I had to do with the photographs available on the internet. And this is basically my source. I mean, since then I have checked with Kevin Brownlow and with Russell Merritt and with others, and they have given me more photos because they are very anxious to see the work progress. But in fact, my main photograph, the most useful, was this one, which poses a number of problems, because if you look at, those are the first two elephants, so the camera tower is somewhere on the right, but 300 meters further. And you see that road, which is just a dirt road, the lot they were using, they were renting, was not, it was not legitimate road, it was internal to the lot. And the first thing you notice is that in fact you have houses here and there, and that if the camera is on the right and films toward the arc, it is using a very narrow channel, because it cannot go on the right, it cannot go on the left, but they had to dispose of some electric poles, and not strangely enough, if you look, you can see the last pole from which the lines were diverted to pass behind the camera tower and to rejoin the last poles on the back. So in fact, they had, that road, obviously, you don't see it in the film. Because in the film, if you look one row of elephant, the first row, second row, third row, not third row. There is nothing in front of those two. So, when you look at the set itself, not always easy to, where's that one? it will be easier to go that way. The other way, obviously. I can't believe I've lost it. No, it's that one. So you see, first row of elephant is here. And then between the first row and the second row here, you have the stairs that comes from the left and goes to the right. And this is exactly where the dirt road is under what you can see. Something about I forgot to say, but it's not very much important now, that I was also wondering how many extras you could have in that set. And, well, I just started counting them. I just realized that it was very difficult. It was always assumed that there were probably 5,000 extras, 10,000 extras. I am absolutely positive that there were always less than 1,000 extras. No problem. But what is interesting is the fact that you just realize that the set itself is thought in order for you to be unable to count the people, because you have those steps, black and white, black, white, black, white, and all that crenels above the tower, and a lot of decorative tricks that give you a feeling that everything is teeming with people, even when they are not. What do I want to show you now? This could be interesting. No, it will be later. So it will be that one. You remember the photograph that we saw of the set seen from the south? And this is the set seen from the north. And this is, we know perfectly well, this is Talmadge Street. And the photograph was taken from the corner of Talmadge Street and Prospect, which is one of the things which allowed me to locate precisely the lot where they were shooting, because in fact there were two lots possible, but only one that would match that photograph. Then check, counter-check. Then it's an American friend who just told me, but what about Google? So I asked Google what was at that place, and this is what I got. The house is still there. You see, it's 100 years later, and the house is still there. Look. Oh, there is absolutely no doubt. The disposition of the windows and things like that. And in fact, it is exactly where I knew it had been. I didn't think it would still be there, but it was. This is this photograph is the first which allowed me to understand how they managed to take all the extras and the horses and the chariots up on the top of the wall. For a time, I thought that they could use a ramp, an incline ramp, somewhere around here, because obviously you needed some space to put it. And for a time it was even included in our 3D model until it was discarded because it couldn't work. But then I just realized that here you have, assuming that on the opposite side, the one that we don't see, the one which is on the Great Hall side, you have the main entrance to Babylon, what they call in the film the Imgurbel. This is the inside entrance to the gate. This is where they defend against the Persian invaders, and this is where they start if they want to go outside. And I mean, the photograph was not very good, but I was pretty sure that it was that, meaning that in fact the extras on the horses, imagine the horses climbing up there. Imagine convincing the horses to climb. But they did it. And if you look on some photograph, you just realize that you have a platform just behind that tower, and this is where they could assemble and start with the procession. Another interesting thing is that from then on, I showed that to Richard Kosarsky, who told me, but I have better than that. And this is the photograph that Kosarsky provided me to. But I mean, the film was already finished when he gave it to me. You see, it's a much better photograph, and then it's much clearer that this is really a ramp giving access to the main top of the wall. Speaking of the top of the wall, I'm going to show you, it was one of the best surprises of that research. In fact, in the film, you have this is taken directly from the film. So here you have the royal chariot advancing on the top. And obviously, Lillian Gish explained that two chariots could pass each other at full speed. Obviously, this is quite impossible. But Griffiths was able to photograph at the same time the royal cortege and the cortege of Ishtar entering the city 20 meters below. But then, this is something, but where is the camera? And you just realize that to do that, you have to put the camera. This is the section of the wall that was used for that scene. Absolutely, you see, there is a big void, the big gap in the walls, which is here. And this is where the cortege starts, and the camera is up there. And another proof, I was quite sure of my pinpointing, but another proof happened quite by hazard. Let's see where it is. Oh, but it must be at the beginning. That's it. Ah, no. To see it, I must go there. So il fait 10 secondes. Yeah, this snippet for me is absolutely fascinating because, for one thing, you just realize that in order for Griffiths to have the great priest and what he is looking and what he is overseeing in the same shot, he had to put himself on top of the tower just to make that shot, which was so simple to do somewhere, anywhere. When you look at it, you see, what he wanted is to have at the same time the great priest and the royal procession. Meaning that if he had to go on the top of the tower, that was all right. He would do it. He did it. As for this is interesting only because it confirms exactly the position of the set and the lot, because we know that the walls, the Great Wall, was overseeing the corner of Sunset Drive and Hollywood Boulevard, and this is exactly the corner that we see. But it's a corner on 1916, which means that there is no road. It's practically dirt road, and you see that you have cars, probably 40, but you have still horsemen. This is definitely a cavalier that we can see in that little bit of image. So this is exactly the sort of what I would like to make clear is that obviously I started from sheer curiosity, trying to understand and to check, but in fact I just realized that in some way I was entering the logic of Griffiths, which is absolutely not what the logic of such super productions would be 10 years later. The question, for instance, is why did he go to the folly of building that set? I mean, even if it is a bag full of tricks, even then he had to build it. And he had to put hundreds of people up there. And he had to secure it against the winds. We're in California, not very far from the sea. So it was an incredible challenge. Why? And in fact, I'm practically certain, and it goes from all the other sets in Intolerance, that for Griffiths, the set was, not only the set was the show, but the fact that he built the set was again more the show. He wanted to impress the audience with the idea that he didn't fake anything. Obviously it's false, but this was the idea. And it's rather interesting to think that 6 years later only, Douglas Fairbanks produced Robin Hood. And Robin Hood has the second largest set since Intolerance. But in Robin Hood, William Cameron Menzies and others were smart enough to know that there was no need to build entirely the set. They could build the sets to about 20 meters and add some what they called glass shots, paintings that would double the height of the sets. But this, they knew how to do it. It is very interesting to think that, in fact, Intolerance is full of special effects. So they had all the means to do it with special effects if they wanted to. They didn't want to. They wanted it to prove that Griffiths was able of anything. So this was the idea. And it cost a lot to Griffiths, obviously, but this was the idea. It is an idea for a long time. Again, it was said that the historical documentation was absolutely researched and full of detail and things like that. And I am practically certain of the contrary, which means that Griffiths asked a few assistants to assemble a lot of material to have ideas and things like that. But he was not really interested otherwise that in the sheer size of the sets. One thing we know he wanted absolutely is the elephants. The elephants in that big set of the Great Hall, and the elephants that appear from the beginning of the film entering the city of Babylon, and which are used later in the film to push the combat, the fighting towers. And it was always assumed that if Griffiths wanted elephants, it was because of Cabiria and the famous images of Cabiria, Pastron's Cabiria, with that big set on the big elephants. And accepted that. Well, obviously, everybody told so, and all the memories, the souvenirs told so, and there was no reason to question that. And then I came to think of Griffiths more as 2000 than anything else. And I'm not speaking of other films. I just realized that the elephants in Intolérance are not at all the same elephants as in Cabiria, which are real elephants. The elephants in Intolérance are circus elephants, seated on a stool with the trump. But it was the great time of Barnum and Bailey. It was the popular show by excellence. And just think of having 30 figures of elephants. So, just to check, I looked for posters of Barnum and Bailey, and you see, this is absolutely the elephants as we see them. Not with the monkeys, but it is the elephants as we see them, and in Intolérance, much less dignified than in Cabiria. What another thing, I must come to an end, or have I come to the end? Tell me. I started a little late.
Yeah, that's okay. You can have like 5, 10 extra.
I won't do more. Uh, ouvrir avec. Voilà. What I want to comment to finish, this is in fact the Babylonian set as seen from the Griffith studio on the opposite corner of Hollywood Boulevard. And you can, I mean, the interesting thing is that we have a lot of photographs. There exist a lot of photographs because many passers-by photographed it. It was seen from everywhere. But usually there are, we were just at the beginning of those small Kodak camera, which were very, very small pocket cameras, and the prints that we have are usually very poor quality. But we continually find new photographs, but most just disappear. Anyway, this one is from the Ince studio or Griffith studio towards the set. So what I wanted to. This is, well, I'm going to use, you remember what I said, and you see the number of details that absolutely defy the possibility of counting the people. There is so much, especially when there are more than that. There are so much in the picture that you just see the fourmilière en français, the ant. Yeah. Anyway, this is probably one of the first photographs who started me on that research. It is at the French Cinematheque. It has never been used because nobody knows it apparently. And obviously this is where I said to myself, how can it be? But then it also helped to understand. From some time I had been puzzled by two things. One were those things, you have them everywhere. But you see them or you don't see them, and they contribute to shadows projected on the set. And in fact, obviously, they are supposed to be lamps. But then, what is the idea of lighting such a space with small lamps like that? You see, they are there just to add to the confusion. And the other thing, it took me some time. There are photographs where here you have obviously the trace of a fire that has been there. On other photographs, it isn't there. And I just realized at the end that, in fact, Griffith had organized so that during the filming he could send smoke through that opening here, but that when you look at the film, you have to look very, very, very carefully, very attentively to guess the smoke. And to understand that, for instance, the smoke is very clear the first time we see the whole set, and is much darker at the end when Babylon falls. But what is more interesting and proves that you mustn't always confide in photographs, because in fact, what looks like trace of some big fire is only the fact that the stock for the film was orthochromatic and didn't register at all the same way as the photographic emulsion that the photographer used for his own photographs, meaning that the smokes exiting the set are much more visible on the photographs than they ever are in the film. So I was looking for another thing, and this will be the last because we must finish. Yes, I am still puzzled. I don't have the answer. This is the camera tower. And in fact, this photograph has been known for quite some time because Kevin Brownlow used it in his book, Hollywood. And I mean, I showed the photographs 2 years ago again at Kevin Brownlow. And he told me, where did you find that? In your book? Well, but because Kevin was sure that there was absolutely no photograph of that tower. But in fact, it is because he was looking for something like that. And in fact, it is something like that. And there is absolutely no doubt. Once you have understood the logic of the set, this is the tower camera. And Kevin did quite agree with me on that. But now you must realize that in fact there are two platforms able of ascending or descending. On one of the platforms you have the workers, which came from the theater and which were used to manipulate the decor. And they knew how to carry charges and things like that. So on one platform you have the workers. There must have been, I understand, 6 or 8, just to lift the two platforms. On the second platform, you had Billy Bitzer, Griffiths, Carl Brown, and a few guests. We know that Fairbanks came. People were inviting, would you like to try it? So just imagine the structure and imagine that it had to be able to ride on rails. Certainly not. I never found a photograph of that rail system. I would love to. But even then, what I still don't understand is if the camera is there, how can it get done slowly, not showing the wooden structure in front? I'm going to show you, one last photograph. It is really probably the last one that I got. Oops, that's it. I found that on the internet quite by accident. It is obviously intolerance. It's a photograph of the builders who were, as we know, Italian workers who came who had worked before at the San Francisco Fair, and this is where Griffiths had the idea on recruiting them. But what I am practically sure, but I cannot be sure, is that that guy, slightly apart from the others, but obviously associated with them, is Walter Lyman Hall, the one who never made a name with the film, but there is, I would say, a very, very, very good chance that is the one here. I mean, we know things about him from the memoirs of Karl Braun, who says that he was a wizard with a pen. Not with a pen, he always had 12 pens on him, pencils. So we will finish with Walter Lyman. And now, because internet is fantastic for that, we know exactly where he came from. He was born in India, entered the States, was naturalized at mid-30s, died in 39. And from intolerance, he just left Griffiths, never worked again with Griffiths, but became a director of special effects. Thank you.